No, I got it. Hello, blockchain ecosystem. Very excited to be having this event today. We still have people joining us, so we'll kind of have a little bit of light chat. I'm coming to you from probably where all the rest of you guys are at home, and happy to be having such a phenomenal group of people that have joined us. You know, San's recent haircuts, you know, San's a lot of the normal comforts that some of us may have had prior to COVID lockdown. And I know toilet paper has been a point of pain for some people, and there's been a lot of blame on hoarding and what have you, but finding out that it was the difference between what was available in commercial supply chains versus the home-based, the consumer supply chain was really enlightening for me. And I'm sure there's going to be a fun comment of that or two throughout the event. But this is a time for us to be learning and engaging and finding how we can best use the technology that's available to make the most out of improving what has been highlighted as broken by some of the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the table. So I'm going to ask Pam to share the slides, and we'll have a quick intro, and Mark gets to be highlighted first. No. So welcome to the digital transformation of supply chain. And we're proud as the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce to be able to host a phenomenal group of, dare I even call them, experts. I don't usually use that word because in blockchain, it's very, very difficult to actually be an expert because the space is growing so rapidly. There's so many different blockchains. For anyone to say that they are overall a blockchain expert, I think is a gross leap. That, you know, they're very, very few people could actually make that claim. But these gentlemen come to the table with expertise that is exceptional and has been grown over time. You'll see one of the, what I call OGs, one of the old guard of standards. And I'm going to let Michael Darden make those introductions, so I won't spoil it, but I don't think I have control of the screen, Pam, so I'll let you roll there. Just want to make sure that everyone that's joining us is aware that the purpose of the Blockchain Chamber is to create a safe space to explore and learn about blockchain technology. So our social mandate is raising awareness, facilitating adoption. I really, really enjoy that part, and promoting advocacy. We inspire it. We don't act as an organization that's a 501c6, which in the US is an organization that does lobbying. We are here to serve the community and to share grassroots perspective. And that's for what's happening in commerce with consumers and people that are building their careers in and around blockchain. So if you're one of those people, you're needed. We'd love to have you join and participate with the chamber. Next slide. We just wanted to highlight a few of our members today. DFM Data Corp is one of our most recent members that you see highlighted here. Michael, the CEO of DFM Data Corp, is the OG in the digital freight matching space. He has been in the space projecting what's possible since, I think, prior even to 2004. And before they were handheld, you know, before they were cell phones, he was visualizing what could be done with technology in supply chain. So I look forward to being able to introduce him. Paramount does some phenomenal work with building software, including blockchain solutions. And we have a lot to be thankful for in regards to the Government Contractors Association. Right now, that's where a lot of funding is coming from. They're helping facilitate the engagement of members of the chamber with available government contracts. And Abraham Seong, who leads that organization, is also the ideator of the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce. So very thankful for their support of the Chamber. And Idril Services, another organization that is providing support and bringing in phenomenal talent to help build blockchain-based solutions. So I'm very happy to be able to highlight those sponsors today. And before we move into today's event, I want to make sure that you guys are aware of and take advantage of the opportunity to engage with us again on May 21st and May 28th, because we're going to be, I mean, if you love this lineup, you're going to really enjoy the next two events. I don't want to give too many spoilers. I think Michael will be referencing some of the guests we'll be having, and May 28th is going to be a fun day, a game changer. So look forward to having you join us for those two upcoming events. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for caring about the impact that technology can have and for being interested in learning more. So welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael. Proud to have you as a member of the Chamber and thankful for all the amazing work that you have done in helping bring together this panel and for what you're doing in the DFM space.
Well, Linda, thank you very much for the introduction. It's very nice to be here today, and today is not about me at all. This is about this panel of experts that we have here, and I am so excited to be able to hear what they have to share, because the knowledge of the leadership that we've been able to gather for this panel is really pretty exciting. Bringing Mr. Supply Chain into the equation, Dan Stanton is joining us to be able to have some discussion about a recent use case that he's completed working with Mark Manning, and they'll be presenting a few slides on their demonstration of their product and their solution that they offered to the airline tracking of automotive and authenticity of product and verification of inventory utilizing a blockchain solution that's really helped to be able to generate some new throughput capabilities in utilizing blockchain in the aerospace side. Karen Kilroy joins us from Kilroy Blockchain. She's the CEO and has won several awards as being a blockchain champion for IBM several of the last 4 years, I think 3 of the last 4 years. Patrick Duffy joins us from BETA, the Blockchain in Transport Association, who's working on developing standards. And if we're going to talk standards, you got to bring John Greaves to the table, Dr. Blockchain. And John, I am always thrilled to be able to have conversations that lead off with you. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you to be able to kind of do a short introduction about yourself, talk about the work that you've done over your career and the technologies that you've helped to be able to bring to force and deliver to this marketplace. You're muted, John. So you guys have to unmute John, somebody from the control side.
I did.
Nope.
I did it.
Perfect. There you
go. It wasn't me, you see. It was the control person. A very good morning to you, to everybody, both externally and internally. It is, of course, always exciting to be on one of these presentations because you know that if what you say is said well, then we will have more people who will realize the imminence, the absolute requirement to adopt and implement blockchain as fast as possible. You will be late to the table. Not many people understand just how many thousands of blockchains are already up and running. I look forward to the great ubiquitous blockchains that are to come, where entire global unification occurs. Typical of that perhaps is the coffee industry, run through the Coffee and Cocoa Alliance out of Brussels, Belgium, with everybody piling in now back down to a local grower in a Jamaican hillside. But enough of that. About a quick bit about myself. I actually work for Consensus Health. We are a blockchain and federated learning provider. We do focus on the health sector, but in all parts of it, in the federated learning, in the acquisition and cleaning of data, in immunity ID and so much more, and of course in the supply chain. I currently belong to 18 accredited standards bodies, of which I am chair of 9, 7 industry associations engaged in blockchain, and 7 government bodies across the world, which are also engaged in blockchain. The leaders being at this moment in time the avaricious approach of our colleagues in the European Union and Australia. There are 3 types of standard entities, in case you're not aware. We are all rapidly adopting blockchain because we recognize that it is a necessary requirement to add to existing standards or create standards, because standards are what accelerates business. That's a given. I'm an AIDC veteran, automatic identification and data capture. I recognized some 10 or more years ago, but let's call it 10, that AIDC's future would be with blockchain. It would be the tool. It would help blockchain adopters conform to the Ohio principle, zero human intervention operations. For that is what blockchain is about. It's the final obstacle. It removes humans from the computational era. It prevents us dabbling in data by having clean data. And we're all moving there, as I've said, from the Department of Commerce to the EU, to IEEE, to SEN, the European standards bodies, ISO, the Produce Marketing Association's blockchain task force is vast. And GS1, most important of all at this time. It's big dynamics, it's incredibly powerful. You have numerous valid corporations now who will speak to it, but all of them are also now very anxious. All of those mentioned are very anxious to have standards brought to the forefront. And that's what we're doing. And that's what I do every single day. Aren't I lucky? Thank you, Mike.
John, always a pleasure, sir. Appreciate your introduction of your vast knowledge and expansiveness. One of the elements that I didn't hear you mention in here was anything about RFID, but we're going to come back to that as the discussion goes on a little bit, because I hear you had a little bit to do with that sort of stuff. But hold off on that for a minute, though. We'll get back to it in a minute. Patrick, can you join us here on the audio side and give a short intro about yourself?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
Great, thank you all so much for having me. As Linda introduced us, it really is a wonderful gathering of expertise in this space. My name is Patrick Duffy. I'm the president of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance. We are a member-led organization, again, a 501c6, member-driven organization that's focused on building out a global vernacular for blockchain-enabled trade. We're working on open source and royalty-free data specifications that power the supply chain and transportation business processes, with the eventual goal of realizing those Ohio principles that John has described. We have hundreds of member companies spanning all aspects of the global economy, including some of the world's largest transportation providers, some of the most meaningful shippers, and intermediaries of all sorts, technology providers, insurers, bankings, and even some regulators. So really excited about joining the conversation today. Look forward to participating.
Well, thanks for being here. And the key word that I want to try to associate with Patrick is the co-opetition. And co-opetition is really an enabling element of blockchain that the founder or excuse me, not the founder, but the current, what role does Dale play inside of BETA?
Dale Christie from FedEx, who's their blockchain fellow, is the chairman of our BETA Standards Council board, the overseeing body that helps ratify and publish our data specifications for industry consumption. And
Dale Christie has been really vocal about the need for co-opetition, of the fact that this is bigger than any one company. This is industry and world-class changing of what needs to take place. And I'm thrilled to be able to have that sort of representation across the supply chain side coming from his leadership and the leadership there at FedEx.
That's right. We definitely believe that it's too big of a task for any one organization to take on that itself. It's really going to take the pooled financial and human capital from global organizations to come together to realize this.
Yeah, and just so that everybody on the call knows, there is a little bit of a relationship between Patrick and Mr. Greaves, they have some overlap in working on some beta standards opportunities.
I've been very lucky to learn from John.
Yeah, he's an outstanding person to be able to have in your life. So I'm thrilled to have him in as part of my repertoire to be able to communicate with as well. Next up, I welcome Karen. Karen Kilroy is with Kilroy Blockchain out of Dallas, Texas. And Karen has been really on the thought leadership side of being able to work mostly through partnerships with organizations like Oracle and IBM to facilitate blockchain development, and just has an incredible story to be able to tell the work that she's done. So I welcome Karen to be able to give a few minutes of an introduction to herself.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Karen Kilroy. As he said, I'm CEO of Kilroy Blockchain, which is a company that I started in 2016. And I started it, though, with my existing company, which was an e-commerce development company. And e-commerce and web development I've been doing since it started. And I usually count it by how old my youngest son is. He's turning 25 this summer. And that was when I built my first website, was when I came back from having him. So I hear some snickering in the background.
So I can relate. That's me. I had a 25-year-old too. I started, so.
Yeah. So I always think of how long it's been by him. So I've been through the whole evolution, in the trenches as a programmer, and so when we saw e-commerce evolving and then blockchain come along and AI, we kind of put all the pieces together and said, wow, look, what could we do if we take all this stuff that we've been doing for 20 years and combine it with these new things, and so we're really riding on the convergence of all these technologies and making lots of new inventions.
Yeah. So the key term that I want to associate with Karen here is blockchain as a service. It is really an innovative way to be able to help onboard and connect other folks, and it's one of the approaches that Karen and her team have been instrumental in being able to facilitate for adoption.
Yes.
So next in line we have Mark Manning from iTrace Technologies. Mark, can you take a few minutes to be able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing that's related to blockchain?
Yeah, sure thing. So Mark Manning, founder and CEO of iTrace Technologies. Traditionally, we've been a supply chain security company providing supply chain security technologies to help global brands fight counterfeit, gray market trading, and diversion. We got involved in a blockchain project, and we'll talk more about that in a minute with Daniel, with Honeywell Aerospace, to help them provide parts provenance to the aerospace parts that they are manufacturing, and help them to secure their supply chain of component suppliers that provide parts into their aircraft manufacturing. So that's a blockchain-based parts provenance application that we are providing a security component to that connects the physical item to the digital ledger. So that gives you some background on where we came from with a history of securing products and physical items in supply chains, and now adopting the blockchain as the future ledger for recording these transactions of products and parts as they move from manufacturing through to end of life. Outstanding.
And where's your company located?
So yeah, we're in Silicon Valley, California.
Okay.
Based out here in sunny California today.
Well, very nice. Thanks for joining us so early in the day to get us kicked off. And I'm thrilled that you and Dan are going to kick us off in our presentation here. So if we can unmute Dan here and let Mr. Supply Chain give a short introduction of himself, and hopefully our pre-call conversation about the bullwhip effect doesn't get him too distracted in the discussion of where we go from here.
Well, thanks for queuing me up, and thanks for inviting me to join you today. So yes, I am known as Mr. Supply Chain. I'm really a supply chain executive, an entrepreneur, and an educator at heart. So it's really been my focus for the last several years is helping to explain what supply chain management is and sort of grow the capabilities globally for all of us to be able to manage supply chains more effectively. obviously one of the new technologies that is coming in and has a lot of potential to address challenges that we face in supply chains with collaboration, communication, visibility is blockchain. And narrowing down, more specifically, one of the big challenges in a lot of supply chains is fraud, right? And so whether that's counterfeiting or diversion of products, and that is one of the problems where blockchain seems like a really, really useful, elegant solution. I actually am the co-founder of a company with some unique technology to help address that problem. Part of what we have discovered on our startup journey, though, is that really solving that problem of product authenticity comes down to building a secure provenance. And there is a role for blockchain to play. However, when you're dealing with digital technologies in a physical world, you have to make sure that you're securely and reliably linking the digital to the physical. And so that's kind of driven us to create really a framework, a way of thinking about how we look at this portfolio of technologies that are available and align them with the strategy for a supply chain so that you can choose kind of the right combination and put the puzzle pieces together to solve, what is a common problem but needs to be addressed differently in different scenarios. So we have done that, in this case for Honeywell, and Mark and I are going to use that as a case study to talk about this framework that we use for looking at the problem, and then how we're putting these puzzle pieces together specifically for this use case for Honeywell.
So I'm going to jump in here and just kind of, for the audience's sake, before you do your demonstration, and Pam, if you can cue up their slides, there's two passages that I'm going to read from a really recent supply chain magazine article, and it's referred to or states a few points that are going to lead right into, I think, your presentation here, Dan. And again, this is really high level, just to be able to kind of make it so that this is across the board. But what is blockchain and how is it influential to supply chain? Blockchain is essentially, as the name suggests, a chain of blocks. However, instead of physical chain, there's digital information on the blocks stored in a public database, the chain. When the block stores new data, it is added to the blockchain. In order for this to be done successfully, 4 things must occur. Number 1, a transaction must happen. 2, that transaction must be validated and verified. 3, that transaction must be stored to a block. And 4, there needs to be a hash that is created for that transaction. When a hash is created and the partners are involved and trading partners also have a hash, then the digitization of the transaction can take place. So the last point of this, before I transition to your presentation, is how is blockchain influential in supply chain? Same article. Several key ways in which blockchain is useful in supply chain. Number 1 is provenance tracking. Number 2 is cost reduction. And number 3 is establishing trust. So with those 3 key points, I'm going to turn it over to Dan to be able to talk about the points of his presentation and the success experience that they experienced at Honeywell.
Yeah, it's right on target. I think that's exactly right. And the provenance, what's interesting about that is it's a problem that, I'll say most folks that have worked in supply chain are aware of, but it's, one of those things that it's like, yeah, I know that's an issue, but it's not my problem. And so it tends to get ignored. And I know, for example, folks that have worked internationally, like I remember a business trip to China a few years ago. And, one of the common tourist stops is the silk market in Beijing, which, however many floors of stall after stall after stall, and probably half of this stuff was counterfeit. Well, if you think about that in terms of, a company, a manufacturer, a brand, a retailer, there are lots of issues that come to bear. Certainly, dilution of your brand is an issue, potentially some product liability, and even, just direct costs. It turns out there are lots of situations where customers are now buying fake products and then returning them for refunds or warranty. And so I mean, there are indirect costs, but there are really direct costs. And so, you know, in the past, counterfeiting has largely been handled either by marketing or maybe by the legal department. Some certainly collaboration with the government, but you know, the truth is, as long as the problem stays relatively small, nobody can make the business case for really going after what is going to be an expensive thing to treat. And part of what you know, really I've come to as a conclusion, and Mark and I are of the same mind here, is that one, it's a big problem, it's growing fast, and the risks and the dangers are becoming much more severe. And two, really the way to solve this is to address it in the supply chain, because anything, you know, most of what we have done up until now has been reactive, right? You identify a problem, and once it gets big enough, you go spend some money to do something with it. But what we actually need to do is get out in front of it and build it into our supply chain strategy, so that having ways to verify the authenticity of a product and manage its provenance the whole way through the supply chain just becomes a standard part of business. And, you know, truthfully, quality management principles will tell you, you know, the way that you really reduce the cost of quality problems is to engineer solutions in, rather than trying to fix them, you know, when there are problems later on. So to that end, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, how do you link this concept of product authenticity and product provenance with the way that supply chain folks actually think about our supply chains? There are several frameworks out there for supply chain management. One of the most well-known is the SCORE model, the Supply Chain Operations Reference Model. And the way the SCORE model works as a framework is it says, in a supply chain, you really have 6 high-level processes. And all of the work that happens in a supply chain falls into one of those 6 processes. The processes, you know, at that top level are plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable. I've got, if you pick up a copy of Supply Chain Management for Dummies, I explain it in a lot more detail there. But where it becomes useful for this conversation is you say, actually, 4 of those 6 processes are all places that we need to look very closely at how we're addressing product authenticity as we design and execute those processes. And so those 4 processes are on the outside of this circle. It's the source, make, deliver, and return processes, right? All those are key parts of any supply chain. All of those are points of vulnerability for fraud or for counterfeiting. Within each of those processes, there are really 4 groups of technologies that we can use to help ensure provenance and manage authenticity. And those are different ways of marking a product, different ways of capturing and sharing the data, different technologies for preventing tampering, and different approaches to serializing the products. And so, you know, back to the conversation earlier about co-opetition, this framework really lays the groundwork for that co-opetition, right? Because you can say, well, there are lots of different ways of marking a product, and some of them are even complementary. What the framework lays out then is a way of saying, okay, how are we addressing the need for marking a particular product in a particular supply chain that meets the operational, the environmental considerations for this product, for this supply chain. So that means, you know, for some supply chains, you may need something that can be sensed remotely, right? RFID tag, GPS locator. In other supply chains, you may specifically want something that you can't detect remotely because you don't want that data exhaust. You don't want the leakage because maybe that enables a different sort of a threat that you're trying to protect from. So this is the approach, is, you know, starting with a product in the center. How do you layer the right technologies, the right solutions around it, and then integrate those into your supply chain processes? Does that make sense?
Dan, when we go into life cycle of a product, the terminology that's been used for a long time is things like cradle to grave.
Yeah.
Is this more like birth to death with the labeling side that you're looking at, as opposed to cradle to grave?
Well, I think it is dependent on the situation, right? I don't think there's a uniform answer that you can apply everywhere. It could be cradle to grave. It could be birth to death, right? Which I think is, very much the use case that we're looking at. Part of the birth to death that we're redefining in an era of circular economy is, right, when things actually have multiple lives. So at what point is it dead, or when does it go to the hospital and get a couple of parts replaced, and then its life gets extended? So I think it depends on the product. It depends on the supply chain. In any of those scenarios, though, when it matters whether a product is authentic, you need to be able to track its provenance to really have a high level of confidence in the authenticity.
So I'm going to share another short little article component here. It's from a recent publication. It's called Blockchain Meets Supply Chain. It's a nice article, but it's talking exactly what you were just describing about the circle. It says blockchain supports the circle. One area where blockchain could play an important role in the near future is in the circular economy. That's the business model that encourages companies to reuse materials rather than continuously consume new resources. When Gartner recently surveyed supply chain leaders from the plan to invest in the circular economy, one question focused on investment in blockchain. Few respondents said that the companies use that technology now, but 38% of them said that within the next 5 years that they will explore its use in the circular economy applications. Those companies expect to use blockchain, for example, to identify materials and then track them through their progressive life cycle.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's right on point. And it's actually exactly what we're going to be talking about here.
That's why I'm passing it over to you again to be able to bring up your slides and start talking with.
Nice. Let's go to the next slide. So here's an example, just to kind of cue it up, specifically around that marking technology, right? So we talked about co-opetition in each of those security technologies. So this is an identification mark that is being printed onto aircraft parts right now that are manufactured at Honeywell, which is the project that Mark's company iTrace and my company Secure Marking are collaborating on. So this really unique pattern that looks like a bunch of sticks randomly spread in the middle of a square is actually an identification code, right? Very much like a barcode or a QR code. But instead of it being an open source technology, this is a proprietary technology that's owned by Mark's company. And he can explain some of the reasons that this is really, really a much superior solution over some of the open source things for the goals and the needs of the Honeywell supply chain. In addition to etching this code with a laser onto the parts, which is how how this code is applied right now, we've put over the top of it an additional security laser using ink from my company, Secure Marking. And so what that means is now we've got a mark that is a layer of security by itself because it's this proprietary mark, but we've added this additional layer of security that we can use to first read the mark. So that adds a second factor of security, but it also ensures that the mark hasn't been tampered with, right? Because now you're using two very secure proprietary technologies together. That gives us a much, much higher level of confidence that not only is the mark accurate, but that it hasn't been, that it's authentic, and that it hasn't been altered. So you can't just copy it anywhere along the way.
You can't just make a photocopy or a picture of it.
Exactly. Or somebody that has a laser take that image and try etching it again onto a different part.
So Dan, just to help everybody understand the difference between a QR code that they're familiar with and that they see any place and can read with their phone, and how this would be used.
Oh, that's perfect. You're doing the segue into Mark.
Yeah, I'm gonna be able to explain that quite clearly for you as we get into the next two slides.
Super. That was one of the questions that was in the panel, so I don't even want to take credit for being that smart.
I will pass it over to you, Mark. You can take it from here.
Fine, thank you. So, great question. Why can't you use a QR code? And before we get into why a QR code is not suitable for this, let's go back and understand exactly what Honeywell is trying to achieve with their blockchain parts provenance. So the whole purpose of the application that Daniel and I have been working on is to provide a parts provenance for Honeywell Aerospace. And when we talk about the circular economy, this is a perfect example of how this fits into the circular economy. People may not be aware that the average aircraft component, a major component of an aircraft, may live in the aerospace industry for between 10 and 15 years. And in that time, it may be applied on up to 4 different aircraft. And as it gets taken off one aircraft, it will go back, get refurbished, it will be repaired, it will be updated, and it will be then a spare part component that gets put onto a new aircraft when a part fails. So the aerospace industry has a very deep interest in understanding the provenance of the parts that they are putting on their aircraft. And they've been doing this for a long time, and there's a paper trail and a whole documentation process that goes into tracking and understanding the maintenance records of an aircraft component, where it's come from, where it has been.
Yeah, most people would know it as an ERP system, right? I mean, it's just the overarching system that's collecting their information.
Well, you'll find that it's actually done on paper. It's not as sophisticated as an ERP system.
Oh, wow.
Well, and the other piece that I'd throw into that is it's not in the silo of a single company, right? These parts, get installed on one aircraft, taken off, refurbished, sent to a distributor. That distributor sells it to a new owner. And so,
there's no other industry it can be used in. It's just got to be reused in this when it's reconditioned, right? So now you've got life cycle expansion because of the fact that the part still has functional use.
But you have lots of players, and it is a global industry.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah, airplanes don't stay in the same spot, and when they break where they broke.
Right.
Yep. So Honeywell wanted to revolutionize the used aircraft parts marketplace, and what they created was a marketplace called Go Trade Direct. And Go Trade Direct is a marketplace similar to eBay or Etsy, with Carfax kind of merged into it. So if you can imagine the two things put together, to provide a marketplace for aircraft parts. Traditionally, the marketplace for aircraft parts is done via telephone calls and emails. The online marketplaces have no photographs like you would expect on eBay. There's no real parts information. The listings are kind of obscure. And they wanted to revolutionize that process.
The one other piece that I'd throw in there, Mark, is there's a big issue with phantom listings, where somebody will post that they have a part for sale, hoping they'll get an order, but they don't actually have the part in inventory.
I can't imagine any other industry that would have that same sort of problem.
Yep.
But
what they wanted to do was try and create an environment that had trusted buyers and trusted sellers identified on a blockchain, and the transactions that were occurring between those trusted buyers and trusted sellers were occurring as blockchain transactions, and they're recorded on the blockchain, and then can be processed and transacted in a digital way. So
you're actually scorecarding the participants too, because you've got economics of how often they're giving you good data and that they're consummating transactions.
Yep. So then when I got involved in blockchain, it was Christmas of, I think it was 2015, maybe 2016. There was a lot of hype about blockchain. There was a lot of blockchain news going on. And I decided I was going to build one of these blockchain networks and figure out what it was all about. So threw up a couple of servers, created a blockchain environment just to understand what the issues were and what all the hype and excitement around blockchain was. In doing that, I realized that blockchain had a piece missing. And it was a great technology for recording transactions and bringing people together to collaborate. But the piece that was missing was a secure connection between a physical product that you have in your hands and the digital ledger. And how do you securely create that digital twin for a physical item so as it can be recorded on a blockchain? And you can ensure that the item that was scanned or transacted on the blockchain in the very beginning, when it was born, when it was created, is the same item that you're actually transacting with anywhere else in the supply chain, anywhere else throughout that product's life cycle. Okay, so being able to securely connect a physical item to the digital ledger was the piece that we became very interested in. And this is how Daniel and I got connected. Talking to Honeywell, they also realized that if they were going to create a parts provenance for their used marketplace, if they could ensure that the data for that part was actually for that part over its life cycle, that part would become more valuable in that transaction because it had secure provenance information associated with it when it was being sold on their GoTrade Direct marketplace.
But Mark, people don't understand why that can't be done with just a database. Why can't I just have a secure database that's sitting at my location, that's got this data that's sitting inside of it, and that's where I keep it? Why does it need to be on a blockchain? What's the benefit?
So the benefit to Honeywell of using blockchain for this was that they also realized that when they had their parts suppliers and their manufacturing facilities, and they wanted to bring a new partner or a new supplier online, it's very easy to drop a blockchain node built off of their actual blockchain into that supplier and have them provisioned on that permissioned blockchain as a secure and trusted partner, participating in providing these transactions into the Honeywell blockchain ledger.
And that's not easy, right? That's not them just going, oh, I want to be a member so I can write information to your blockchain. There's a proving ground. There's some governances in there that they have to be able to certify that they're going to do business a certain way to be able to participate with the others, right?
That's correct. It is permissioned and it is controlled in a permissioned way. And Honeywell brings on new suppliers in that permissioned blockchain. And that was the big advantage to them, aside from having this immutable ledger that can store this transaction data and ensure its reliability over many, many years, ensuring that this part is able to be identified and has provenance on that blockchain.
Right.
Enabling people to connect to that blockchain in a permissioned way became a big advantage to them.
So I think John Greaves wants to join for just 1 second here because he wants to comment on that same question as well. So if we can add John to the discussion for just a minute.
Thank you, Michael. Mark, and indeed Daniel, I resonate so strongly with this issue posed by Bill. It's not unusual to have it posed. That what on earth is the difference, right? Why do you need what appears to be an additional burden and has no added value? We know that that is actually not true. Every single current system is rife with fraud, illegitimacy of data. Daniel, I don't want to be unkind to you or indeed to Michael Darden's client base, but I'll give you a classic line that blockchain resolves. By melding the physical and the metaphysical, meaning the actual occurrence and the data occurrence with, oh, honest mate, definitely, he's just coming around the corner. He'll be there for the load in 15 minutes. No, he's not. He's 470 sodden miles away in Arizona, right? So it's those immutable data points, once mapped and once configured, not just in the Honeywell example, but in a proper blockchain that renders the consideration of databases, which are so passé, so old-fashioned. I mean, you got high school kids can re-engineer a database and prove that you got 4 pallets or something, or transact it as if it was in inventory. If it was also clever, may I just pose the question as to what we just went through? We just went through a supply chain visibility exercise called coronavirus that showed that we most definitely need blockchain. We need that level of integrity. We need the additional validations, because what the Honeywell system does that Mark has created, I have more to say in a moment, but I'll finish now by saying what Mark and you have created is it builds provenance. Good Lord, there's that word again.
There it is.
Need anyone
John,
to be legitimate. We have legitimacy in the history of an immutable transaction. Thank you. I'm done.
John,
I'd like to throw some stuff
John,
in here too, if I could.
That's
I'm here
the
too,
point.
remember me?
Yep.
Yeah, the point that was made about tying the provenance back to the products are really important, but you also have to think about some other things. Tying the provenance back to the human beings that are touching the systems. And then soon it's going to be tying the provenance back to the algorithms and the AI and the data upon which the AI is going to be based. So this whole proving of what is real and authentic is the whole key to this either being a whole bunch of malarkey or a system that you can actually rely on.
It's great commentary, Karen. Thanks for jumping in there as well. I think, you know, this is an age-old problem. It's a discussion point that comes up all the time, is trying to be able to solve a problem with a blockchain solution that people don't know what the benefit of the blockchain solution is. And truly the benefit of bringing in a blockchain solution is the term that we talked about before, of that co-opetition and trustless environment, by having authentications of each party sharing information to the shared ledger, makes it so that everybody's copy is identical. And if there is an error trying to be induced into that by somebody who is a trusted party, then there is a filter that blocks it and says, wait a minute, you can't do that yet. And a distributed ledger has that capability to be able to solve for that, whereas a database gets rewritten when you update the record. And the previous record, you can keep an accountability of what the change was in a change log, but it's not the same as being able to enter a reversing transaction if something goes in a different way than what was expected, but truly maintaining the accountability of the transaction. So,
and I'd also like to, with that, could I add to that, Michael?
Sure.
With the provenance of the product, the other thing that I'm seeing as like a gap from an e-commerce developer standpoint is the tracing of the product back through the whole blockchain provenance. That's not really being picked up yet on the e-commerce area, and I think there's a lot of opportunities in working with e-commerce developers and with supply chain blockchain to be able to forecast project what is actually going to be purchased. Because one thing that gets overlooked with e-commerce is we have the consumer. We actually have the pulse of the consumer. And one thing recently, I was going to try, okay, let me try to subscribe to all the products that I buy directly from the manufacturers, because then that way they'll know what I'm going to buy. And it sounds logical, right? Well, nobody is using these simple subscribe buttons.
Good point. So let's let Dan jump back in with Mark and keep going on this. And if we come back to this point later on, that's maybe in the natural order.
Let's continue to answer the question of why not QR code and travel down that path a little bit, so as people can understand why Honeywell looked at iTrace and secure marking to solve this problem for them, and didn't just slap a QR code on the part.
Good point.
So,
thank you.
If you look at the slide that's up right now, you've got 4 photographs in the middle of this slide. And this is, if we can go back once, yeah, that's it. This is product that had been securely marked. It's actually in the watch industry. We've been providing covert applications for track and trace in the watch industry for many years. The 4 photographs in the middle of this slide are photographs of the iTrace technology that had been applied to watches that had been in the supply chain. Some of them had been sold. Others of them had been put onto marketplaces by diverters who were trying to disguise the source of these products. So the photographs in the middle are pictures of iTrace 2DMI marks that are on products that have been returned from the marketplace for one reason or another. Significantly damaged in the examples on the left-hand side, the diverters had tried to scratch the marks off and remove them from the parts so as they could cover their identities as diverters and not be in violation of their distribution agreements. The ones on the right-hand side is just wear and tear on watches that have been worn and returned for warranty, repair, and replacement. We were still able to decode the information out of these marks and provide the identification, track and trace of those particular watches to identify the diverters on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand photographs are to be able to authenticate the product as genuine product that was valid for warranty, return, and replacement. So one of the keys to Honeywell was being able to implement a technology that would survive significant wear and tear and damage throughout the life cycle of that product. Again, we're talking about an item that can be installed on multiple aircraft over a period of 10 to 15 years. So a technology needed to be robust and secure to be able to survive through those harsh environments that are in aerospace.
Like a tattoo.
Exactly. And this technology is far more damage resistant and robust than a QR code. If you took out 50% of a QR code or removed that many pixels from a QR code that had been applied to a product, you would
get
not
no read
be able to extract that information.
Right.
Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. So again, the question that was asked on this call, and I get asked it all the time, is can't I just use a data matrix or a QR code for this? Well, years ago, yes, you probably could have done. That would have been a valid technology to apply to a product. But what's happened today is that the QR code has been adopted as one of the primary mechanisms for hackers to be able to gain access to people's devices and machines. So the QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, I scribbled all over it to prevent anybody scanning it. But that will actually, if you scan that with an Android device, it will actually download an app in the background and install a backdoor session on your Android device that will allow anyone to be able to gain access to every keystroke and every email and every document that you have on your Android phone. Currently, 23% of Trojans and viruses are transmitted via scanning of QR codes. QR codes are easily created and they're easily replicated, easily copied. And if I wanted to provide an authentication mechanism on a counterfeit part, all I would do is apply my own QR code that's scanned to my own copy of the brand's authentication website. And I can authenticate any part that I produce as a counterfeiter for my own benefit. So using an open source technology like a QR code actually enables the counterfeiters to authenticate their fake products because they can create their own authentication codes and they can authenticate those parts to a copy of a brand's website. Now, this isn't some made up scam that we just thought about in a lab. This actually happened to
every
AMD
day
with their Ryzen chip. Okay, so AMD printed, they thought they were going to be ahead of the game. They were going to authenticate their high-end Ryzen chip. They printed a QR code for the heatsink of the chip, and they printed a QR code sticker on the outside of the box. What the counterfeiters did was that they opened the box up, they took the expensive Ryzen chip out of it, and they replaced it with a cheap Intel pin-out copy. It didn't actually function the same way, but its pins were the same, and it fit in the same socket. And then they printed a brand new QR code for the top of that Intel chip that replicated exactly what was on the Ryzen chip. They also then printed another QR code sticker for the outside of the box, stuck the sticker on the outside of the box, and then sold them on eBay and Amazon. Those high-end Ryzen chips that they took out of the box were then sold to the folks who were building cryptocurrency mining platforms. And they then made their money basically twice. out of that one AMD Ryzen chip. So although QR codes are a fantastic way to connect people with products for engaging a consumer, unfortunately, they're no longer useful. In fact, they're detrimental as an authentication technology because they have been adopted and are easily created by the guys who want to create authentication for fake and counterfeit products. So that hopefully helps answer some of the questions as to why not slap just a QR code on there, because it doesn't provide you any kind of security. It doesn't provide you any kind of parts provenance. There is no way to guarantee that the part that had the QR code on it when it was produced in the factory is the same part that has the same QR code on it when it is in the supply chain 5-10 years later. So hopefully that helps answer some of the questions of why Honeywell realized that the missing component between their blockchain ledger that they were using for parts provenance was the ability to be able to securely connect the physical part from the moment it was born throughout its life cycle to its end of life. So if we go on to the next slide. What we did with Honeywell was that we enabled them to use mobile application technology, simple mobile devices, iPhone and Android, to be able to scan the parts that are on the iTrace marks that are on the aircraft parts. Now that gave them a very, very easy, secure way to authenticate a part and then record every transaction that occurred with that scan and that part on their blockchain ledger with geolocation information, with user information, date and time. Everything about that particular transaction is then pushed to their blockchain ledger every time a part is scanned using the iTrace and secure marking technology that has been applied to the products. Now, the maintenance guy at the aircraft or the person in the factory has the ability to then connect to that blockchain and download additional documentation that is produced and delivered by the blockchain simply by clicking more information or by logging on and downloading the documentation about that secured part, comfortable in the knowledge that that part in his hand was the part that was originally produced, originally authenticated, and has been tracked throughout the supply chain. So if we go on to the next slide, this enables the ability to present user data from the blockchain about those parts and the movement of those parts throughout the world. Where is it today? Where was it yesterday? What transaction occurred? Providing the user information and the authenticated user information about that part, and then delivering specific information about that particular part, maintenance information, documentation, certification information, and the historical provenance of that particular component to understand where it's been. If we go on to the next slide, you can drill down then using the data from the blockchain into every single transaction that occurred. Where did it occur? When it occurred? The blockchain transaction ID, again, identifying the location of that part and the provenance of that part from each transaction. So giving the data visibility that allows the users to then interact with the information that's stored in the blockchain. Not that it's in there on the ledger and been secured, that's a given with a blockchain. How does the user gain access to it and make use of everything that's been recorded, all the transactions that have been recorded, and providing that data to maintenance technicians, to shipping and receiving guys, to anybody who then interacts with that part, and for Go Direct Trade to be able to give that data with the part that's being sold and adding that value to their circular economy of the used aircraft parts marketplace.
Right. So the blockchain transaction ID number is the hash that is what is storing the information for this block, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody in the viewing audience was making the correlation between the blockchain transaction ID and the hash that we described before. I'm just going to kind of connect a few points here. again, this is from an article that I think it should be standard reading for anybody in the supply chain industry. I actually read it the other day. It's Building a Transparent Supply Chain. It's in the Harvard Business Review. And next week, we have the author who's going to be in the presentation for us for next week's panel. But I'm just going to touch on a few excerpts from what's on page 5. And it's referring to how blockchain is applied in the ways that you're describing here. When blockchain record keeping is used, assets such as units of inventory, orders, loans, and bills of lading are given unique identifiers for which serve as digital tokens similar to Bitcoins. Participants in the blockchain are given unique identifiers or digital signatures, which they use to sign the blocks that they add information to the blockchain. And it's important for folks who aren't completely sure of how blockchain systems work and what the difference is between that and a database. It is the fact that each entry point, each exit point, each access point is monitored and given permission and control. There can be public information that's extracted from the blockchain to be able to go into the public as well. But the point of our meeting today and our discussion was really about the improving of supply chain by use of blockchain. So I'm going to touch on the next point that I wanted to mention here, which is that one common approach of improving supply chain execution is to verify transactions through audits, but they provide limited help in the improved decision-making side. Another way to strengthen supply chain operations would be to mark inventory with either RFID tags or electronic product codes that adhere to GS1 standards, globally accepted rules for handling supply chain data, and then integrate into a company's ERP system with those of its suppliers to construct a complete record of the transaction. This would eliminate execution errors and improve traceability. Tell me about the standards of your labeling technology and how universal that is, or how closed loop that it is for adoption across the marketplace, or is this truly just a private labeling instance of the aircraft marketplace?
So our technology is proprietary, and it is secure and unique to each brand that we work with. Every brand that we work with has their own encryption key for our technology, and they use our technology for their own security. It is not an open source technology. It's not an open standard. And therefore, it's obviously in violation of some of the tenets of blockchain, but it has a specific purpose as a security layer. And that is one of the reasons why it's implemented in this application. And I see John shaking his head there in disagreement, but
Mark, I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm overriding our chairman, Mr. Darden, on this, because ATA 2000, which is the aviation industry's standards for everything, including parts marking, is supplemented by numerous proprietary parts marking systems that have been tried, and some of them still succeed in niches, through direct parts marking, which is an AIDC SC31 ISO standard that is prevalent. It has several proprietary elements in it. It's about to get Digimark, because that's coming to WG1 of SC31. It already is working on JABCO, which is just another barcode, is its acronym, but it's actually German in origin. And yes, there are validations for any proprietary product, but to say it's proprietary and therefore cannot be standardized, thus ensuring your corporate success, instead of you ending up as yet another Silicon Valley niche sector provider, would be my ambition for you. Because you can go into ISO or IEEE or any standards body, protect your rights. I witness for you Savvy Technology, the DoD's preferred standardized RFID transponder for military assets, is a standard, ISO 18000-7, and has come to no harm from it. Was acquired by Lockheed Martin Corporation even after becoming a standard. So I hear what you say. I understand how any industry, any provider has to start by protecting their environment somewhat. And indeed, you have an excellent, what would I call it here, an excellent use case that would guarantee you a place in my society, if you'll forgive me. where you would prosper, sir, rather than striving singularly by you know, jetting around the world. I do have experience in the sector. I mean, I am a Honeywell intranet user. I am persona grata in Honeywell across all of its elements. I've worked for Emirates on the 380 program, Airbus, Lufthansa, British Aerospace, Embraer, Gulfstream, Lear Industries, and yes, I know about Honeywell's Go Trade environment. I've been there, seen it. It's excellent. I love it. I'm reaching out to you and saying, come on in. The water is warm, Mark.
So
John, bring this with you.
John, love the enthusiasm for this. So tell me what, you know, with a technology like this, with something that's innovative, something that's got a new way of marking, something that's proprietary at the moment that you want to be able to get a set of standards for, that you want to be able to make available for others. And Patrick, I want you to jump in here too and join, because you've been, you know, in this recent challenge of having a new industry in a new area that needs to be able to have some standards wrapped around it, and your organization has really stood up to assist in that regard. You know, John's the gatekeeper. He's been around for a long time, being able to identify, you know, how to with standards, and clearly with his current activities that he's involved with, I think he's certainly a go-to guy to be able to help facilitate what the roadmap is. So from your experience and his experience, I'd love to have the two of you guys kind of chat about how standards play a role and how it makes it so that parties can adopt blockchains and facilitate that co-opetition that we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, John has kind of an analogy about hacking your way into the jungle. You know, the co-opetition is key as we push into the darkness of this jungle. And the standardization of those efforts is really going to not only accelerate the ability to bring up an ecosystem that will thrive, but to create the resiliency and the use of these types of technologies. John, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit.
Actually, what I would say, Patrick, is as you and I have worked so closely on engineering the data standards of beta, not to be confused with best practice or industry governance, etc. And you've done a great job on that. Fabulous. What I also would say is that, you know, we have at this moment in time one of the greatest challenges in the standards community. And Mark, Daniel, Patrick has been instrumental in helping us start to recognize this challenge, which is the models, the templates. If you want a word to hate, ladies and gentlemen, going forward, hate the word templates. They have been intransigent and normative for so long. Everybody just spins one out and puts it on the table and says, well, this is what we're going to have to do now for this. No, actually, blockchain has destroyed all templates. That's its very starting point. That's its very rationale. That's where you start from. So when someone says score, with all respect to Daniel, yes, Daniel, I'm a supply chain guy years ago, so long ago that we had chariots. But we also had direct parts marking on the chariot wheels. I worked with a guy called Julie, Roman guy, on that, and he was very pleased with the efforts. But SCORE is itself is something that your organizations, you know, the CSPCM, etc., CSCMP, and others should be updating and modifying now to reflect this is not 1945 Normandy Beach supply chain, which is where it came from. And you know, we have the same in regular standards, if you will, in the standards accredited community, because we work with an OSI 7-layer model. It's out of date. It doesn't reflect half the technologies that are available or half the deliverables. And the worst thing it does not do is comply with the Ohio principle. So Patrick, Patrick and I have had the luxury of sitting in a bar in Brighton, Michigan for way too many hours a year ago, going right through this. And there is actually an excellent lady on this call, Dr. Denise McCurdy, who is also instrumental to Patrick's efforts and has been a star in crafting usable standards based on either a physical or a metaphysical standard? In other words, the physical entity, the proven and provenance, or the data standard, the legitimacy, authenticity, transmittability, and usability of the data itself. And
so, John, right on point for everybody. Pam, if you could pull up that slide that we added as the last slide to just be the background for this discussion, I think it'll help the viewers to be able to kind of follow what we're talking about too, because the traditional transaction side is changing from what we used to account for to what, and again, I'm going to give full credit here to this publication of this Harvard Business Review, Building a Transparent Supply Chain. This graphic in here, I think, is just absolutely fantastic to demonstrate the differentiation between a conventional flow of paper and EDI and documentation creation and what we miss and what's the black hole of all of the data from the transaction with the conventional way of keeping records. And you know, on the right hand side, we have the simple relationship that starts with the who's who and working with who, and who's the intermediary, and how does the intermediary pay the people, and how do they move them, and all of these steps right into this blockchain that makes it so that the history of what took place isn't some piece of paper that's got a couple of steps that are encapsulated inside of it, but instead every step is looking at it independently and referencing the information that's relevant for all parties to be able to have access to. So I think the discussion is flowing properly with the provenance and the connection of the parties, but I wanted to be able to put the graphic up in the background so we can certainly continue. And Pam's put the link up in the chat room also.
So if we go back to the slides we were previously on, I think we can have Daniel finish out the piece of our presentation with the conclusions.
It's just one above here, I think.
There we go. Perfect.
Yep, indeed. So there's this convergence of themes, right? And I think, one of the big things is there's a lot of talk in the supply chain world about digital twins, about digitization or digitalization, and obviously blockchain. And the key is figuring out how those converge and really create complete solutions, and let us reframe and redesign blockchains. But at the end of the day, doing it in a way that actually creates benefits, right? Because if it doesn't somehow make it faster, better, cheaper, lower risk, then there isn't business value in it. There isn't going to be an incentive, and it's not going to be adopted. The good news and the bad news, right? And is that product fraud really is emerging as an urgent issue. We're actually, we're seeing it right now, just headline after headline about the N95 masks. A year ago, when Mark and I were having these conversations about product authenticity and fakes, very, very often the response I would get is, yeah, that's interesting, but it's not, on my list of priorities for the business, that doesn't make the top 10. Would I like for that problem to go away? Sure. Am I going to devote any effort to that? No. Now, all of a sudden, we're really globally seeing the scale of this problem and the impact that it can have, and that's creating a lot more awareness and interest in the work that Mark and I and others have been doing. As is often the case with supply chain stuff, it's cross-functional, right? It can't just be done in a department. It's not a brand protection problem. It's not for the legal department. It's not for the marketing department. It needs to be part of the supply chain strategy. I would also say, not only do you need to have alignment across the organization, but the nature of a supply chain is you need to have collaboration with your customers and your suppliers as well. Right? If you talk about circular economy, if you talk about tracking products, birth to death, cradle to grave, multiple lives, that means you need to find ways to that people who you can't control still have an incentive to collaborate with you. And that truly, I think, if there is one answer to the question of why a blockchain and not a database, that's the answer, is because this isn't a problem that we can solve inside of an organization. It's a problem that we have to solve through collaboration and community. And for that, blockchains are a much more elegant and sustainable solution than databases. And the last point, and I'm gonna like throw this up in the air and then watch what happens with John, is open source technologies genuinely can hurt more than they help if they're not used correctly. And it's really, then about looking at your supply chain, your unique challenges, and putting the puzzle pieces together in a way that you're minimizing the risk, giving yourself the highest level of confidence in the authenticity of products, creating systems that are functional, usable by the people that need to use it when they need it, in sort of meeting transaction speed requirements, but also life cycle, right? If they're going to need this information in 20 or 30 years, how do we build an infrastructure that we have confidence will survive that long? And so, certainly there is a place for open source technologies, but not every open source technology is appropriate for every challenge that we're facing.
Great presentation, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you guys talking about the uniqueness of your solution here and how it applies to standards. I'm going to bring Karen in here to be able to talk. Before I do, I'm going to mention a point here that I don't know if it's clear to everybody who's watching or that's even on the panel, but I found this in an article the other day from Ernst & Young, and I found it a real eye-opening element from a gentleman named Paul Brody. He's talking about traditional supply chains, and he says there's oceans of digital data, but only islands of useful information. Excuse me. The use of systems such as electronic data interchange, EDI, and XML messages are being utilized by these companies and try to maintain information continuity. But even these systems pose their own challenges, such as being out of sync and moving data only one stop down the supply chain. The result, inventory that seems to be in two places at once. And all of a sudden, my light bulb went off over my head, and I'm like, wait a minute. That's the same double spend issue that Bitcoin is solved by using blockchain. And it's just the fact that the old antiquated methods of being able to move information, just kick it down the road, kick it to the next step of what takes place, are not going to be sustainable for what we need to be able to transmit at the user level, connected to the ingestion point of the data, passing it to the action point with a smart contract. And I can't think of a better person to bring in right now than Karen to be able to talk about some of the previous projects that you've worked on in space.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate it, Michael. Yeah, the way that blockchain, one thing that I would just like to start with to point out that we haven't touched on is blockchain and how the law impacts it. And I'm co-founder of the Texas Blockchain Committee, which you can look at as texasblockchaincommittee.com. And we're a nonpartisan political action committee that is, we have the purpose of establishing an official Texas blockchain working group with the legislatures. And we've got involvement of several of the reps. I'm really been surprised at how well informed these folks are at blockchain and business. And so we're moving the laws along in that direction. And the reason for it is because things like, what we're discussing here, where, blockchain is used to trace provenance of parts, blockchain is used to, for instance, track exports. There's a story that gets told on the blockchain, and what that gives you in essence is an audit trail of all the things that happened on all the different systems. And so if we can get the government to understand blockchain, adopt blockchain audit trails, that's going to, I think it's going to grease the wheels for the entire industry. And so I'd encourage you to look at the legal aspects of what we're doing, and also make sure that there's laws that are passed in your areas that support making your business more efficient through using blockchain.
And it's a great point, Karen, that every state looks at this differently. And the legislators that are in each state have the ability to be able to help drive change and drive the legislative change for those specific locations. Actually, Linda's introduced me to a couple of folks that are involved in, blockchain expansion in their states and their government work. And it's so interesting to be able to see how each state has their own set of rules and has to be able to, you got to find your injection point. So.
Yes, and you can't assume that everything is working just because something, and that's another point that I would make is that, before you copy something someone else is doing, look and make sure that they've been successful. And, that would be with blockchain projects overall. I've noticed that. Overall, when you adopt a blockchain project into your organization, another point that I would make, I've always been in IT, and I'm really honored to be sitting here with all these experts in supply chain and standards. But from an IT perspective, what happens to us is we get projects thrown into our lap. Okay, now it's not exciting anymore. We've eaten the frosting off the top of the cupcake. Now it goes to IT, and that can't happen with blockchain projects. It just absolutely can't, because there's too many players involved. IT isn't going to know when your contract changes. So it's a commitment that's not just like an IT project. It's a commitment from the whole organization for a shift. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to throw out every system that you have. As a matter of fact, you need those still. You need those workflow applications. And then, so what you want to do, if you're trying to figure out how do I slice this up? Well, the first thing you want to do is say, okay, which of my processes need to tell a story? And I can have those processes touch the blockchain. So now we've got one single story that is every block is linked based on the previous block, so it's tamper resistant. We have multiple copies of it. It keeps going based on smart contracts. So there's all kinds of advantages to going that way.
And it's just putting the building blocks together with what that use case is, right? So
yes,
I'm looking right now at the same article right next to where we were just talking, and it's got many of these functions can be automated through smart contracts, but smart contracts can't be implemented until you understand what all of the entry points of data are and what all of the output points of the data are, and how to map that. You don't end up with excess amount of data. You end up with the right pieces of data, because you're truly assembling the story from the different sources of where the information is. And there's just one more sentence I'm going to read in here, and then kind of get back to bringing John in on your pieces on the standards as well. But it's important to note that blockchain would not replace the broad range of transaction processing and accounting and management control functions performed by ERP systems such as invoicing and payment and reporting. Indeed, the encrypted linked list or chain-like data structure of the blockchain is not suited for fast storage and retrieval or for efficient storage. Instead, the blockchain would interface with legacy systems across participating firms. Each firm would generate blocks of the transaction into its internal ERP system and then add them to the blockchain. This would make it easy to integrate various flows and transactions across firms. So can you give us a couple of examples of some of the recent blockchain projects that you've worked on as well, and kind of frame into it how the interaction with existing systems was done by your team?
Are you still talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, normally, okay, so when I start to analyze a project, and I'm just going to throw this in because it kind of dovetails to what we were talking about, the things to look at is participants, assets, and transactions. And you want to identify those three things. And if all the participants are you, then you probably don't need blockchain.
Right.
So yeah, that's one way to start to carve it out. Now, a couple of examples of things that we have worked on. We did an escrow app. It was actually a 1031 transfer app for a company that is that does it's a 1031 is an IRS law that lets you, when you sell something, a property, you have a certain amount of time to purchase a property of similar or equal value. And I'm not an attorney, but you need to prove that you have not touched your money in between the time that you sell your previous property and buy the other one. And so the money goes into escrow. And
Right.
so that is one, that was the very first proof of concept that we wrote for blockchain. And the purpose there would be, so there was an audit trail. So in the case of where those 1031 transactions are audited by the IRS, that the IRS could just look at the audit trail. And at that time, it was so early, I said, the IRS isn't even going to know what blockchain is. How are we going to do that? And they said, well, we can just print it and send it to them. So
Yeah, we're going to print the blockchain.
Yeah, I thought that was funny, but that's been years ago, right? More recently, one of the applications that we built is for a group of agriculture companies in Nepal. And what this does is it allows the farmers to track what fertilizers were put on certain crops. And then as those crops get broken down into smaller and smaller parcels and distributed by the brokers, the provenance can always be tracked.
So, and as Dr. Blockchain and Mr. Supply Chain can both attest to, the data points between each one of these different supply chains are vastly different and vastly complex. The ingestion points, the legacy systems, every one of these is a use case that requires really some strategic thinking around. Have you guys had success stories that we can talk about related to that planning and standing up of those new blockchain initiatives?
I think so, Karen, if I may.
Oh yeah, please go.
I think, I had a bit of a heart-stopping moment earlier when I believe it was Mark said hype on blockchain, because he crossed over to the dark side in 2015 Christmas time, although it was hype. Well, I'm sorry, but by 2015, the Bitcoin bluster was behind us and we saw a radical technological change. You must consider this is post-Turing methodology. IT, since the world began, post-World War II, was based on Alan Turing's work. And there was nothing wrong with it. It had burgeoned into a multi-trillion-dollar industry supporting brands that we're all aware of, who continued to farm it for revenue and profit. Nothing wrong with that either. But blockchain has ended Turing methodology because Turing is silos, and silos are no longer possible or available. In fact, Daniel spoke to it earlier in his dissertation, saying that one of the challenges is SCORE is a silo-based model because it mirrored information technology of the time. It mirrored that Department A was Department A and B was B, and my God, suffer that they should ever sit down and talk to each other. Well, what you're seeing now in blockchain implementations, ladies and gentlemen, is that IT department is going from 200 to 2 people, because those are, and there's Karen nodding because she's going to come back in a minute, because that was my segue to her in effect, because blockchain is not labor intensive. It complies with the Ohio principle. It is not extraordinarily difficult to implement, but it does require, guess what? Change. Significant, awesome change. And incidentally, Daniel, digital twins forms part of that change as well. Chris Diorio of Impinj is the champion of digital twins. I suggest you reach out to him and get his papers. They're absolutely brilliant. But Karen, back to you for white collar downsizing. Whoever would have thought of it?
Yeah, I agree with you, John. It's you know, that's the whole cloud syndrome too. The arrival of cloud technologies have made it so companies can just and it's not always in the cloud too. Sometimes it's on-prem, but you can purchase these technologies ready-made from the big companies much less expensively than you could do hiring big teams and trying to do these things yourself. And then plus the technology changes so fast, so it lowers your investment by going with, you know, for a big project, by going with one of the big companies that's going to keep up that infrastructure. Plus you're always constantly trying to get attacked, you know, so you need really hard security. And all of those things used to take hundreds of people in IT departments, and now that's all over.
Having said that, Karen, you know it's my penchant. Everybody on this call knows it's my penchant to be somewhat contradictory, but always supportive.
I'm ready for you, John.
My CEO tells me that I can sometimes be perceived to be cantankerous. That's fine. But in saying, you know, the big boys, you know, I hear you, there's a certain surety in it, but I'm not, frankly, a fan of transitioning from someone who provided me with my legacy to someone who is providing me with my future.
Right, but we're not talking about you. We're not talking about you. We're talking about people who won't get fired for buying, you know what?
You know what? Karen, I just saw a lady get fired for buying you know what. So let's not get too excited about that. Even that slogan is becoming out of date, you see, because you're not buying that. You would never have commissioned a yard that built sailing yachts to build you a Coast Guard cutter. That's why you've got Huntington Ingalls and you've got Coral Stream. They don't do the same thing. To Michael's point earlier about and Daniel's open source. My company is committed to providing all of our intellectual property to IEEE Open, which is the new IEEE accelerated standards model. There are protections in it, we are covered, but we believe that our way forward in service of our client base and our industry and the incredible demand being created is to provide the best possible engine in the fastest possible way. And in that respect, this is, you know, I'm not closing this out by any stretch of the imagination. I believe we still have some considerable amount of time to go. But
we do, and there's about to be a transition. So,
but I wanted to make sure that we understood that we're not in that ball game anymore. I used to be Mr. RFID. I was noted 40 years. I wrote standards. I created technology. I hold patents, etc. And it's a wonderful technology. It has actually come of age because of blockchain, because it complies as an essential physical tool for the physical provenance of an actual event. It took place, but I don't need Jimmy to scan something. The machine does it. We're done. And therefore, it's a perfect storm. And for me, I have the advantage of talking from both sides of my mouth, as it were, my blockchain and my RFID side, not to be confused with the ones that people on this call will probably go, no, he always did, he always does, he always will. Yeah, I got that. Back to you, Michael.
So there's that big blue company that we were talking about before, or we weren't talking about, was quoted in a May edition of Supply Chain Digital, where IBM has released a report that's entitled Blockchain as a Force for Good, 5 Principles to Build Trust and Value. And the first one is open is better.
Yeah, all the IBM stuff is open source, so I'm glad that you pointed that out because that sounded a little confusing.
Even though they do not belong to an open source standards organization.
Second,
what about Red Hat though? They bought Red Hat. They're not in the open source standards. Okay. Okay, I trust you. Sorry, Michael.
That's okay. So again, of the 5 principles to build trust and value, the first one was open is better. The second is permissioned doesn't mean private. The third is governance is a team sport. Fourth is common standards are common sense. And fifth is privacy is paramount. It doesn't sound like the old Big Blue.
No, it's not. As a matter of fact, they just promoted my friend, Joe Noonan, to Chief Technology Officer of the IBM Cloud. That happened last night. And I know Joe very well. He's like, he's somebody that stands up stacks on the weekend just to entertain himself. He's real deal.
Well, it's great to be able to see, you know, the big players are also realizing that they can be the scaffolding for the innovation in the space. And I think some of the early steps of creating the playground for people to be able to have some experience with Hyperledger when it first came out as a permission-based blockchain opened up the visibility to what some of those capabilities were of blockchain and gave it those folks that like to be able to play with new technologies a place to be able to go have a playground. Any other comments on the force of good that IBM is referring to from the panel? Dan, you want to jump in?
I have nothing to add at this time.
Wow. I have never heard you be speechless before. That may be the first time I've ever heard that. Patrick, any commentary on the IBM platform and the openness of their...
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the point. IBM has actually been a member of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance for about a year.
Yep.
We've benefited from expertise across a number of our working groups and technical committees, and I do think that the acquisition of Red Hat was really indicative of an inflection point around, you know, legacy Big Blue into, you know, this transformation as a recognition of what is going to drive technology transformations globally moving forward.
I respect Patrick's comment. Of course, he's quite correct. IBM and many others. Let's not pick on Blue. Blue is great. I was Blue once myself, but we do need to be mindful that all of those mega engines, which are essential to this transformation, they hold the keys to many castles.
Yep.
Right? Let's get real. However, Beta is a industry standards association, so it is an industry adoptive. And whilst it is fundamental and very important to the overarching blockchain implementation model that is an end-to-end transition and transformation of supply chain information technology and the mechanisms that surround, shall we refer to it, Daniel, albeit legacy, as the score? And please have one of your damn groups re-engineer that, for goodness sake. I still see stagecoaches running through the middle of it. I think Wells Fargo wrote a part of it. So what we have to do is, there is nothing, this guy here, this John Greaves, has no intention, nor would he ever issue or have any issue with legacy justifiable players. He equally has a problem, just so that we've got a balanced POV here, he equally has a problem with wannabes. You know, two men and a dog, 3 women and a cat, Lord knows what, emerging in the middle of somewhere and saying, oh yeah, you know, we're blockchain now. Really? Please check credentials. Please validate the party. You're not here to engender, support, or financially enable people who can say blockchain in joined up speaking. We are here to enable one of the most transformative changes to industry and commerce worldwide that has occurred in my lifetime, and that's a bloody long time, and in anyone else on this call's lifetime. But to do it, we have to have volition. To have volition, I'm afraid we need 3 things: standards, industry, that's the industry elements that want to join in, and One other thing, and Karen mentioned it, law. Oh my God, I hate it. I hate lawyers. I'm Shakespearean in my view of them, if you know your Shakespeare. As a result of which, I'd rather not, but at the same time, as Michael and I have discovered, thanks to Linda Gertz over the last 2 years, there's a lot of law want to be the law, but their understanding of the law that's required is appalling, Karen Kilroy, appalling.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine pushing these blockchain through laws through fast without giving the folks time to be educated and understand what they're voting on. Like it's you know, it can't be an overnight thing.
Can I jump in? I have a question for Mark around this topic. You know, we're kind of transitioning into a topic around the governance of ecosystems and kind of what's in it for me for different participants. What were the challenges or the opportunities that y'all's iTrace technology was providing for these different network participants, whether they were regulators like FAA or industry participants or ancillary services?
You need to unmute your mic, Mark, and if anybody else has any questions, they can go ahead and put them into the chat, and we'll try to address them here in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, what we've deployed is really, it's not necessarily an industry-wide application at this time. What we've deployed is something that is really an internal tool for Honeywell that is going to benefit them, particularly with their GoDirect Trade platform in the future. And they see the benefit of being able to have the provenance of the parts that are coming into them. One of the things that Honeywell has to do as an aircraft parts supplier to the Department of Defense and the government is that they have to guarantee the provenance of the parts that they are putting into these devices, and they have to know who their suppliers are and that the parts coming from their suppliers are authentic, tested, have a history, and they know that their supplier is a certified source for those components. So the benefits that it gives to the industry overall right now is not necessarily our technology being able to be part of the collaboration. It's that we can bring to Honeywell something that is enabling them to add value to their parts and therefore add value to the data that is on the blockchain. And that data on the blockchain will then be valuable to the industry going forward. As that information is made available to the aircraft manufacturers and then the airlines themselves, and being able to deliver that data, again, off of a blockchain platform, not in a siloed database that is within Honeywell itself.
I would jump in there and say, you know, one of the challenges that I see with a lot of attempts to introduce new blockchain solutions, particularly in supply chain, is they make a lot of sense when you look at them at sort of a full adoption level, assuming everybody is doing it. But they make almost no sense at the early stages of adoption, right? There's no incentive to be the first one. They add no value if only one or maybe a handful of players are using it. And one of the things that I just find so exciting about the project that we're doing with Honeywell is there are absolutely internal benefits. And so there's an incentive for Honeywell to deploy it for their own purposes, but it takes essentially zero effort to allow others to participate and engage and start to see those benefits. And so I think, you know, for example, you can make an argument that a part that is bought and sold on the Honeywell GoDirect Trade platform actually has a higher value than a part from, you know, a random website on the internet, because of the security and the provenance that comes with it, right? There's less risk associated with that part. That should translate into dollars, right? Now for, you know, other players, whether that's customers, whether that's distributors that participate in the blockchain, whether that's the FAA, to now get access to that same data essentially has, you know, zero cost. And so to me, this really does become, this is a use case where it has the potential to grow really big and kind of do the hockey stick, because you don't need everybody to have adopted it on day one for it to create enough value to justify the work.
So in your scenario, Dan, who is operating the nodes? Is it just Honeywell, or does Honeywell have the other manufacturers operating nodes as well?
That one I'm going to pass over to Mark.
Yeah, so Honeywell maintains and deploys the blockchain nodes in their network. They have a team that is specifically focused on that. So when they want to bring a supplier on board, the IT team at Honeywell will deploy the blockchain node and blockchain credentials as necessary for that supplier.
Got it. So they're the controlling node. They're the controller of the node structure.
Correct.
Yeah. What did they do for governance?
From what perspective?
Well, I mean, in order for, you know, a blockchain to work effectively and inviting the new partners in, those new partners need to be able to understand what the mechanics, what the guide, what the standards are for being able to insert information into the blockchain. They need, those governance are one of the first barriers that typically come up when deploying a blockchain solution, is to be able to bring the parties together and say, what are you willing to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to go? And how much are you willing to expose to your co-opetition partners?
So we approach it the other way, is that we tell the partner or the supplier what data we expect from them, and we give them the ability to deliver that data. And again, because they're using the iTrace mobile apps most of the time to scan this information into the blockchain, we've already defined the data fields and the data that we're going to collect on each part. So there is no need at this point for them to have to do any of that collaborative work. We give them the tools, they scan the part, the data is uploaded, the transaction's recorded. And that information is then all available to participants on the reporting side, the dashboard side, and we can create all kinds of different reports and dashboards off of that data.
Right. So they're more a consumer of the ingested total than having to comply their ingestion or their transfer of information over to you, because you've identified what the standard roadmap is.
Well, we've identified a set of data that we want to collect on each transaction, and that's all taken care of as they participate in the transactions.
Got it. Karen, did you want to add something to that?
I don't have anything to add, no.
Okay.
Actually, I have one other piece that I'll add that I think is really interesting about this, again, this Honeywell use case. So I talked about one of the challenges that I often see with blockchain solution proposals is they assume that everybody's adopted, right? We're at full maturity. There isn't really a roadmap to, okay, well, how do we get there? Another piece that I see that's often an issue is they assume perfect continuity in the data, right? So, you know, how do you, you know, in the case of an aircraft part, you know, get a scan on it every 5 minutes of its entire life? Because if you have a gap in that data anywhere, all of a sudden, all of the data becomes, you know, less valuable. But I think in the case of Honeywell, you know, there is value to this solution in the blockchain, even if the data isn't complete. Meaning, the more scans that you get of a part, the more often it gets scanned, you know, throughout its life, the more transactions that are recorded. Great, that's more information. That's a stronger provenance. But, you know, if a part, you know, gets sold and it sits someplace for 5 years and doesn't get scanned, and then suddenly reemerges, well, you know when the last place you saw it was, and you know where the time, or you know where it is now, and you know where it was before that. And maybe you don't have all the details about where it was in the meantime, but at least you know what you don't know. And even having that level of information has value when you're talking about managing, you know, provenance over the life cycle.
So there's a call in or a question in the chat that's related to the beta and where they are in the standards and industry adoption projections and kind of what's in the pipe for that. I know there's been a significant effort that's taken place with beta, and beta was formed in what, 2017? Are you there, Patrick?
Sorry, I was coming off mute. Yeah, BITA came about in the summer of 2017, and our standards development efforts really kicked off in the late summer of 2018.
Okay, and the first set of standards that were put out from BETA were related to, standard measurement items and naming conventions of things. Can you talk a little further about what's coming down the pipe from BETA?
Yeah, so I mean, we're really working around traditional track and trace functionality. So tracking documentation, a specification around location information, around party information, and around shipment information. And all three of those kind of data components combined into an electronic universal bill of lading that will be transportation and geographic culture agnostic, which we think will be really valuable. We don't want to recreate the wheel where unnecessary either. So, we're very much looking to collaborate with organizations like GS1 that have, these highly adopted data components to make those transitions much easier.
Right. So which ones are next on the line? The bill of lading, the electronic bill of lading, the shipper.
So party and shipment will probably be the next specifications to be finished, probably sometime this summer. And those will combine into this bill of lading later this year.
So I know there's a lot of folks that are watching out for that. They're anxious to be able to have something that they can align to. So I keep cheering for your work. I was actually there at the November meeting in 2017 when BETA was first discussed, and I have a notebook here that's got all the 11 chapters of what we talked about being the first objectives to be able to do from BETA. And I'm really excited to be able to see the next set of materials come out, because I think it really helps with the interoperability if there is a set of standards, and a big portion of that is, how to be able to get people to see where they're supposed to go and not try by error and misalign with where they're going to end up. There's been another question that's put in the chat book that I think we should kind of address with everybody. It's one of the biggest blockchain and supply chain use cases, and that's TradeLens. And we have TradeLens and Food Trust, and the two of them are kind of going from opposite ends, from farm to table and from port to other port, and the paperwork between. But there's still more in the digitization of the supply chain, and sounds like Patrick's organization is kind of focused in that direction. But other comments or thoughts on TradeLens or Food Trust?
I have some comments on it. I've studied those when I wrote my book, which is you can download it from O'Reilly Media. It's free. It's on blockchain as a service, as Michael had mentioned before. But those two things are they have, I kind of call those software as a service with blockchain, right? Because it's when you log into one of those systems, you could completely do this without even realizing there's blockchain. It's a very consumer-oriented, customer-facing, easy thing to do. You sign in, you pick your level, you have a credit card, then they run some vetting on your company. And if you're not vetted, if you don't pass the vetting, then you don't get in the organization. And one of the really interesting things that I think that they are a partner in TradeLens is Dun & Bradstreet. And what Dun & Bradstreet, we've all heard of Dun & Bradstreet. If you have a company, you have to register with Dun & Bradstreet. They said they even go as far as to come to your business and knock on the door to make sure you're real if they have to. So Dun & Bradstreet knows who is real. And they also have like credit information. So then they have a blockchain based system that they can hook into these systems like TradeLens to help vet new members. And then once the member is admitted, then it's an assumed trust among the other members.
Right. Yeah, there's some other organizations that do that sort of, background
Mhm.
credentialing and pushing of the information in. Linda's asked if you would be so kind as to put a link to your book in the chat so that
Sure.
everybody would be able to access and download that if they chose to be able to do so.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we had a couple more minutes here on the call. If anybody has any big news or exciting things that they want to be able to share of what's coming down the pipe for them, I'd be happy to give them a minute to do that. And then I want to wrap it up with kind of telling everybody what's coming for the last 2 sessions of the month. Nobody? Last chance. Last chance. Okay, so last 2 sessions of the month, 2 more Thursdays that are left here. Next Thursday, we have another bang-up committee of folks. I referenced this document several times today, and there was a copy of it put in the chat as well. But I actually read the article and was really excited to be able to see all the words come together finally in a nice 27-minute read. But it's called Building a Transparent Supply Chain, and the author is Vishal Gaur, G-A-U-R, and Abhinav Gahi. And Abhi is from Google, and I've connected to both of them and had some conversations about the article and where they're going with this. And again, highly recommended. But Vishal's going to be here next week. He is a 20-year professor from Cornell University in supply chain. We have Sub Hashish, who is from Georgia State University, who is internal material handling and blockchain expert as well, who's going to be joining us for the committee. We have David Simchi-Levy, who is with MIT and their supply chain program. We have James Green from DLT Ledgers, who's going to be doing a demonstration for us as well. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Denise McCurdy, and I hope she's still on the call. Congratulations on your doctoral success, and we look forward to being able to have your contributions next week on the call with everybody else. But Denise is the first one that I know of that's actually gotten her doctoral degree in blockchain governance. And she's really got some insights to be able to share next week. A couple minutes left in the call. Any questions that are left for other panel members? If not, thank you very much, everybody, for coming today and for being part of this panel. I think we covered a lot of territory and hopefully gave the viewers a good show for them to be able to follow.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Linda.
Michael.
Very much, Michael. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And we do have one more just confirmed. Debajani Mahanti, author of multiple books on blockchain, is going to be joining us next week as well. So it'll be fun to hear what she's been doing in blockchain and supply chain, specifically around the COVID-19 response. And we've had some people on the call. Peter Richter, great to see you. Threefold is a fantastic platform that we're looking forward to seeing the decentralization of. Peter, do you want to take a quick second and share?
Yeah, thank you. Well, threefold, what we're doing is, we're on a mission to build a decentralized internet, and we've just launched last week. We've launched our peer-to-peer decentralized and completely autonomous cloud solution, where we're going to hopefully build on, and together with the Blockchain Chamber of Commerce, build some nice, interesting ideas on how to make some positive changes to the world.
Thank you. No, we're very thankful to have friends of the chamber, and as you probably experienced today, not everyone is in lockstep or has the same opinions. This is a organization that is platform and token agnostic, and in no way is pushing any specific product, project. We support our members and the good that they're doing in the world, but we absolutely believe that innovation is going to be done by a diverse group of people, not by any particular level of enterprise or any particular gender or any specific, just think of the dividing lines that have separated us. They're irrelevant when we have technologies like blockchain and unique implementations of AI, and the convergence of these, I believe, is going to help bring the fourth industrial revolution into a very real state that we can experience and have it be part of the reemergence of commerce as we go through what I believe is more of a financial reset than just the COVID virus. But these are interesting times, and it's time to be well connected with innovators and thinkers and human beings that truly have the best interests of the planet and of each other at heart. So thank you all for being part of this expression of the Chamber and for joining us today, and really look forward to next week. I think it's going to be a phenomenal lineup again, and have a wonderful and safe week. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for participating.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Linda. Thank you, Michael.